Hey everybody, and welcome back to part number 2 of our Haunted Harbor playthrough. Last go around, we built a couple of coasters in here and really filled out the park pretty well, I think. But now we're going to try and finish it off. We've got to get 1,200 guests by the end of October year 3, which isn't too challenging of a task, and we've taken our time, but we've built out the park fairly well, I think. So now it's just trying to fill in the rest of the gaps, and we're not going to buy all the land. There's a lot of land that we could buy if we really wanted to, but we're not going to fill out the whole darn thing. Maybe that's for a future replay of this one. But in this instance, we're going to just try and make it feel like a complete park. And one of those things that I really wanted to do in this map is do a log flume. Now, the challenge with the log flume is that you need a good run out after the drop, and you want a pond or something underneath of it as a retention pond and to catch all the water coming out so you lose less water in your system. The challenge with that is that requires a fair, decent, flat space. So I'm kind of looking at some other options of terrain and where we can put the bulk of the ride itself. But really the key element to this is where does the splash go? And in this instance, I think it wants to be right here in between this wooden wild mouse and the wooden coaster here. So that's what we're going to do, is drop this thing in here. And you'll notice I'm already doing some pretty hefty landscape modification, and we're going to keep doing that just because this terrain isn't super suitable for exactly what we want to do here. So we're going to make some additional changes, and actually it's going to help us out a little bit, I think, in the end, because the wooden coaster is going to end up looking a little bit better as well. So I'm not too concerned about what we're going to mess with there. You can already see we're going to lower some of this section here, and it's going to give us some more supports on that wooden coaster. I mean, I'm not opposed to the fact that we built it initially up on top of the landscaping like that, but I do like to give it a little bit of support underneath of the track itself, just to make it, look a little more imposing, perhaps. So we're going to buy the rest of this land in between our wooden coaster turnaround and the park entrance. And what I'm going to do is a fairly standard log flume layout. So we're just going to do a single big lift, single big drop, and we're going to have some nice meandering pathway in between. So trying to work it where we have minimal straight sections, and we're really just kind of alternating between left and right corners and S-bends and chaining those together so it has this kind of nice weaving, flowing look to the whole thing. Now, there's nothing necessarily opposing to doing long straight sections on flumes. There's plenty of examples of that out there. I just think it looks nice to have this kind of meandering type layout that just, I don't know, it feels a little bit nicer to me. Now, we are back messing with this single rail suspended or single rail monorail thing here because it has been sort of a thorn on our side ever since we built the station where we did. And we've modified it a ton of times here for the wooden coaster and for everything else. But the challenge now, we had enough struggle getting the flume in here in the first place just to get a pond. But now we've got to get a queue and an exit and everything else in here in a way that doesn't look totally awful. So part of this is adjusting some things here initially, and part of that is swapping the exit positions for the monorail and for the wooden coaster. And then we're going to rework the queue for the wooden coaster as well, move that over, and then we're going to snake this queue for the flume underneath of the coaster there. So really, we are using all the available space to make it happen. You will notice here that I had not finished the flume because the exit of the wooden wild mouse is in the way. So what we're going to do is take a pretty extreme measure here and bump the wooden wild mouse over by one tile. And now we're going to have a nice new space for it, and we can finish up our flume in the right spot and then rebuild this whole thing. If you were eagle-eyed there, you will have spotted that I did not connect the entrance queue to the entrance itself on the wooden wild mouse. We won't catch that till much, much later when somebody pointed it out on Twitch. So, whoops, but we'll catch it a little bit later. So now we've got a flume, and that's not too bad, but I want to finish with another tracked ride now. We're going to do a car ride in here. We hadn't done a car ride yet, and typically I like these on flat sections just because I don't really love doing elevation change with these, although I probably should get more into doing that. But we don't have that, so we're going to do a little bit of terrain change and some rework of all of this area. And even include a little tunnel here. And we're actually going to come back and theme this a little bit later. This is going to be one of our first maps where we're going to take some of the prescribed themes that we're given with the research and actually use them. So I'm kind of excited for that. But first what we need to do is connect this over, and it's really sort of off on its own up here on this hill. So what I did is added sort of a plaza before you cross the wooden twister coaster here, and that way we can split off on either side, and we can connect over here to this car ride, we can connect to the other side up to the Haunted Mansion, and we can go down into the park proper itself. So I think that works pretty well for the whole thing, and we're going to end up raising this land right here to make it feel a little bit more permanent, I suppose, not necessarily up on stilts. We'll do some landscape modification as well, so it's not just sitting on one giant pedestal here, but I feel like this rounds things out fairly well in terms of attractions. We do have a couple more here still to come, but what I wanted to do here was just ensure our victory. So we're going to go through and do some advertising here since we're halfway through July of year 3, and we still need about 200 more guests, which isn't too much of a challenge, but the advertising will help us out and let us focus more on actual building and not so much the gameplay and mechanics of things. So here we are doing some adjustments, like I mentioned earlier, to the landscape here. And a little bit of this is just sort of feathering out the spaces so we don't have quite as much vertical faces on the various sections of hill, and simplifies it out just a little bit, I think. And then also just really highlights the flume a little bit better, doesn't make it feel like it's in a giant pit. It is sort of squeezed here in between the two wooden coasters, and it kind of feels like those wooden coasters were there first and this was sort of fit in between the two things. I do like to think about parks in terms of a timeline when I can, and in this instance I think those two coasters would have been here well before the flume got in, and you can kind of think of the park having really not a lot of space to put it, and maybe they squeezed it in here. So now what I'm doing is excavating for the pond itself. So this is our retention pond here. One of the issues we're going to run into here in just a second is that the support limit for the single rail monorail is actually super, super low. So we can't actually keep the thing over top of the pond. I thought that would be a very neat interaction right there, but unfortunately we can't do it. So we're going to modify it once, and then we're going to modify it again so we can lower this thing a couple more times and really get this thing adjusted to where it needs to be. I thought about doing more of like a boardwalk where we have a vertical face here up against the midway, but unfortunately we can't do that with the monorail there. As you can see, I tried and stopped. So we're just going to go with a typical pond here, and it actually feels like it fills this area out very nicely, I think. So what we can do now is go through and build a little bit of a deck right here, put a small viewing area, and really just kind of clean this whole thing up, and I think it looks pretty nice. So here's where I'm noticing that I did not connect my queue for the Wooden Wild Mouse, so now we are back in business. So that's good news, and then I can fix up and finish up some of the little details that we had to fix since we moved the thing. So now what I can do is do a little more landscaping right here to adjust this, and we're going to drop in some trees in here, bringing in those two large trees that we've been carrying through the whole time, and then we're going to add in a third smaller tree, and then we're also going to go through and add some bushes and fences and all of the typical things that you would kind of expect. So we'll go through and take care of that here. We'll also make sure our advertising is still up to date, and we'll be in good shape. We're going to do a little bit more work over here by this kind of bottleneck, because we've got four fairly popular rides here. I guess the queue for the top spin has sort of been a different spot, but we've got 3 fairly popular rides right there in the corner, so I do want to make that a little bit more, I guess, clean. But first, I want to do a miniature golf course. Now, we haven't done one of these just yet because it's a new ride type for Corkscrew Follies expansion, and we just really haven't gotten the opportunity. So this park feels like as good of any to do our first one, and I'm actually really happy with how this one turned out. This is going to sit on the hillside here a little bit, and we're going to try and make the thing sit in here in a way that feels like it makes sense. And you can see I'm sort of struggling right now to not just excavate out the entire hillside to make this thing work. But I am trying to do a little bit of interaction here and over-under elements. So one of the things is excavating out the top of this section of mountain, and we're going to try and bring this ride up through the middle of this turnaround and use this as kind of our entry to the top of the hillside here, and we will keep that top of the mountain in place. We're just going to make it a little bit smaller. And I feel like this would be a pretty cool golf course to play on, just because you're walking right around the wooden coaster, kind of rumbling overhead, and you've got a nice view of the whole park down below. Just feels like it would be a very scenic place to be, perhaps. So now we're up on top, and we've got a semi-flat section here, which is relatively easy to just go back and forth and do a little bit of this, curve, hole, curve, hole, curve, hole, and use all of our different hole types. Alternate around. One of the things I'd love to see in Open RCT would be some new golf holes. I just think that would be kind of neat. I feel like this is a ride type that's just sort of underutilized typically, and not really surprising. It doesn't do a whole lot. It's fairly low capacity, but I just feel like they're a fun aesthetic thing to do. So, they're enjoyable to build, and we're actually going to build more of these in some of the upcoming scenarios as well. So it's just a fun one to build on, and this is a cool way to try and squeeze this thing into a fairly tight map already. So we've got some vertical faces we're going to have to really work on here, and I did place one hole underground there. Maybe that's like the cave hole or whatever. But we've got some decent set of pathway here to work from, and we can kind of start to clean up our landscaping just a little bit. Gonna squeeze one more hole here in the end and do a little bit of adjustment still and try and get this whole thing to settle in here nicely. The nice thing is we have a lot of space to work with, so I'm not too worried about trying to fit more in than we have room for, and it doesn't want to feel too cramped, because I don't think this park has felt too cramped necessarily just yet, because we really have used all the space well, but it's not too twisted together, and we don't have a lot of overlapping rides besides a few of the tracked ones, so I think it works fairly nicely together. Now here we can start to just clean this up a little bit, put in our queue and our exit. Already a very popular ride, part of that being that it's popular, and part of that being that it just has terrible capacity. So that's okay, but we can spend some time going through and cleaning this up. There's our win. So we did that well. The advertising helped. We're nearly 300 guests above the goal, which is pretty good. And now we can go through here and just do a little bit of the landscape while our guests have released all their balloons. Now they just got to rebuy them, so I guess it's good for us. So here we are, and trying to clean this up just a little bit, bring some of this section down on this side, and really excavate out more than build up. I think this has been more about cutting away than putting back. I'm going to do a little bit of adjustment there, since that wooden coaster is fairly high intensity, so we're getting a lot of guest sickness over there. Part of this here is also doing some fencing and just some landscaping. In general, miniature golf courses have kind of a nice garden aesthetic to them. At least the ones in the U.S. typically do, and some of them can be fairly detailed in terms of their overall decor. And we're not really going to go that way. We're going to go more towards the kitschy roadside attraction type golf course, and once we unlock the Jurassic scenery, that's going to be our ticket to the theme there. So here I finally did unlock the hat stall and the souvenir stall, and we're going to use these to make some sort of faux little buildings here on the pier, so that fills out those two gaps that I had earlier there on the pier as well. I'm also going to change the colors of the hats and the colors of the umbrellas and everything, so we get a little more color variety in there. Really, it's just a matter to make it look a little bit different. So now that we've finished up that, we can add in some more of the food stalls, because we really don't have a lot of those throughout. But we won, so at this point it's really just a matter of cleaning up the whole thing and just trying to finish out the park in a way that looks semi-complete. So part of this is going to be making a little food court area right here, and I've got some landscape challenges here just in the terms of elevation, just to get this thing to line up correctly. But if I raise up this whole section here, I can drop in a couple of pathways. I can add in our burger stall here, and I think we're going to do a drink stall as well. And we'll use the fence trick here. If you place a fence, place a path, and then delete the fence, the pathway won't connect, so then you can have a little bit of a dead end there, so you can place 3 benches. So that'll give us a nice little seating area right there. Get our fencing in also, and there's our little food court. So I think that works really well to close out this section. We got our first of our themed packs. So this is the Wonderland theming, and we're actually going to go ahead and use this on the spinning Virginia reel here. So we'll go ahead and use those playing cards. We'll go ahead and use the mushrooms and that kind of decorative house thing, and to give it a kind of a neat little feel. I feel like the side walls that we already did with the colored pink and white alternating, I feel like that already has sort of a whimsical Wonderlandy type feel to it. But we'll go ahead and do that. We're also going to change the trough color, which I don't typically do, but I feel like maybe this one has a red paint scheme or something on it. So here's our Jurassic theme, and we have a couple of different dinosaurs that we can use. The nice thing is there's a good variety here, so we don't have to repeat. I feel like some of these theme packs from the original game were fairly limited, so you really didn't have a lot of opportunity to do too much with it before you had to start repeating different elements. So at least in this instance, we can get all 5 dinos in there. We can put in a couple of big trees, give it some shade. It really just kind of fill out the space fairly nicely. I feel like adding those in just does a very nice job at kind of cleaning up the whole space. Trying to see if there's other trees out here before I introduce this third type tree. I always want to look and see what the scenario already includes if there are trees, so then it doesn't look silly when you zoom out and you see the surroundings have a whole bunch of different tree mix, and then internal to the park we have something entirely different. But since there wasn't anything else, we're just going to use this tree. Make it a little bit of a woodsy feel up here. Kind of mix in our post and rope fencing and our mesh fence as well. And then do that dirt and grass, kind of have that bit of a, I don't know, swamp-like feel to it, I guess, which maybe marsh is a better word, but have our bushes and everything mix in there, kind of make it feel sort of Jurassic-y, I suppose. And I think this is lining up fairly nicely here. A couple of terrain change or color of the landscape changes there. I wanted to introduce a little bit of the sand. I also wanted to throw in this little geyser right here in the middle, which I thought could be kind of a neat little element there. I always like to have some good water in the golf courses. I don't know, it's just personal preference, I suppose. Now we have the jungle theming as well, that we can add in some of these heftier bushes and everything, just kind of clean that whole thing up and really build up that theme, reinforce the overall Jurassic feel to it. And the nice thing is it also enhances some of the other stuff, like this pedal monorail now goes around that dinosaur, goes around some of this jungle landscaping, and maybe that entices you to come do the miniature golf as well. So it's kind of a fun little mix there as well. We're also going to do a little bit of screening here in the queue just to separate this out, kind of build the vibe with that whole idea of the fencing and clean up the whole thing. So now we have a pretty good completed looking park, but there's a few things more that we still want to do. Part of that is going to be going through here and just doing more fencing. I mentioned earlier I just wanted to clean this up a little bit. We're not doing too much right here, but I did want to go through and just try and finish this off in a way that just felt clean for as many times as we've adjusted it and edited it. Part of that is taking out the station platform there that it was just hanging over top of the queue for the log flume. It just didn't look good. So we'll go ahead and push it the other direction a little bit. We've got some guests that are just kind of scattered in there, and we'll go ahead and remove those guys. I'm not sure how they got tangled up in there, but it just looks a little bit cleaner now, a little bit more open, and we've just got more space to work with than we did before. So we can finish off with a little fountain there like we had earlier, and it just feels a lot more open now than it did before, and I like the overall look. So in here around our flume pond, we're going to go ahead and build out the bushes and everything. I'm going to raise this section right there by the station, so that way I can put some more bushes there. Just kind of feels like maybe a pier or something that the station we built off of, and then the rest of it is over top of the water. A little bit more landscape modification here, also using those Jurassic fences. Just I kind of like those tall wood fences that aren't super regular, just kind of looks a little more rustic perhaps. So we'll go ahead and use that for the bit of theming there. Come back through here with a little bit of that dirt and grass, and really it's just trying to break up the long swaths of grass. And if you have big sections of trees and everything, it doesn't necessarily look that great to have just grass underneath of it, because you're not really going to have such a clean aesthetic underneath. You're going to have more of that sort of mix of dirt and grass, a little bit more texture, things like that. We also have some of the haunted theming now finally, so we can go through here and plus up this haunted house just a little bit, add in that little mausoleum, add in some of these grave structures and everything, and really get the whole thing cleaned up in a way that looks complete. So the haunted theming is one of my favorite sets, just because it is fairly varied. It doesn't have a lot of stuff, but it has those couple of gravestones and everything, and again, variety, which is nice, so I don't have to repeat the same gravestone over and over and over again, and I can at least have a little bit of interesting change there and make it feel at least like it's somewhat varied. So now I'm going to go through here and just try and raise up this section of hill to try and blend it in a little bit with our initial plaza there. Also, let us put in some more landscaping in there and add in a few more of these trees. Now that we have the third tree, I'm trying to bring it through and be a little bit more consistent throughout the whole park. It always looks sort of weird when you have one tree that's just sort of clustered in one area and then you just never repeat it again. So something to just keep in mind as you're building those spaces out. I added a little candy apple stall here just because we didn't have any food and beverage up top. So we'll go ahead and fill that out with a little space there for seating. And now we can go back through and go in and do a little bit of theming. I think we're going to do on the car ride here. Actually, nope, not yet. We're going to go through over here and do some repaints. I wanted to do the side friction here in the white as well, just because we've really got the whitewash look on all the other old wooden coasters. We might as well do the same thing. Really, that one probably needs it the most since it's over top of the water. And now we're going to build our final ride, because we didn't have a swinging ship, and I feel like it's sort of a weird instance here to have a swinging ship, or to not have a swinging ship by a park set on the ocean. So we're going to go ahead and put it here. Now, it's not up by the water, which feels maybe a little counterintuitive, but we didn't have space down there. So what I wanted to do was stick it up here by the haunted house and the haunted mansion. We're going to go ahead and add in a little bit of water here, just a tiny little bit, so we have a small water feature to the whole thing. And our spooky fence gets carried through from the haunted house that goes all the way down to the haunted mansion as well. So I think that works fairly well. Bring in a cotton candy in there too, and another little seating area. Good spot to watch the wooden coaster too, perhaps. And we're going to name this thing Flying Dutchman, and we're going to give it sort of a ghostly color scheme here, I guess. Also bring back in those Jurassic fences. That way it kind of has that justification for being up this way, where we already have the haunted house, the haunted mansion, and the other stuff. And after all, it is Haunted Harbor. So let's embrace the theme, I suppose. So we're just finishing off the fences here. I am transitioning from the colorful wood fence to the standard brown wood fence. I just always think it looks a little bit nicer in terms of contrast to the other ones. Got our seafood stall there that we'll go ahead and put in, and a bathroom as well. Gonna clean up those stalls and just finish up the whole park. Really, at this point, we can stop at any point, but it's really that cleaning it up to a satisfactory finish and just kind of making the whole theme look okay. And our last little bit right here is going to be this car ride, where I wanted to go with more of a haunted theme for this whole thing. So we're going to go ahead and rename it Highway to Hell, which I think was one of the name redemptions on Twitch. So if you would like to name any of our rides in the future, feel free to join us, twitch.tv/Amusement Academy for that. But we're going to go through and theme this out a little bit. So I'm going to go ahead and recolor the space underneath into that sandy color. We're going to use the skeleton guy just because I feel like, why not? Use pretty much everything else. So we're going to go ahead and put him here. Cars are going to get to drive around him, see him from all sides. I'm going to sort of create a little bit of a reveal there with the Jurassic fence that you come around. You can maybe see what's going on, and then you come the whole way around and see him there. And you dive into our tunnel. Maybe that's our highway to hell, as it were. So I'm going to use the cutaway right here just to help me put some of this bushes and just foliage through this whole space. It was just hard to see around the wooden coaster. And the thing is, you're not really going to see all this in super clear detail because of the wooden coaster, but at the same time, you can at least tell overall how it's filled out. And I wanted to at least give it a completed type vibe. So the cutaway view just helps me place things a little bit cleaner and makes it fit. So that way I can see just a little bit more nicely. So you can see once we bring everything back, it actually looks okay. I'm going to use the red sand texture here now instead of the tan sand. It's actually a little bit of a mix there, but I think it works fairly okay. But now we can come through and just clean up the last little bit of all of this. We're going to rename some of these things, like the wooden coaster out and back here is called Albatross, and there's just lots of little details here and there. I'm also going to replace that info kiosk there with another one. And then finally what we're going to do is a little bit of theming here using some rides. We're going to go ahead and use the miniature golf course here, and we're going to make beach towels. Because why not? If we've got the beach, we might as well assume that some guests are going to come here and be able to lounge on the beach. Maybe these are like rentals or something like that. So we're going to go ahead and use our alternate color schemes, color these in a couple of different ways so it has some variety here. We could also use different rides if we wanted more than 4 colors, but in this instance I think it's just fine as it is. So we're going to use the red, the purple, the yellow, and the blue, and not fill it up entirely, just to give it a little bit of smattering in here, just to fill out the space, make it feel used. I was looking for an umbrella type, but we don't really have that in our theme packets here, so we're going to go ahead and use the giant mushroom. So you're going to have to use your imagination just a little bit, but I think in general it fits okay. But that's it. So let's go take a look at the real-time portion, and then we'll do some before and after. So hop on over with me. So here we are, our completed Haunted Harbor Park. I'm pretty happy with this one. This is definitely one of my favorite ones we've done so far. I think the vibe turned out great, and we filled out the whole park very nicely. Didn't end up buying all the land, didn't need to. I think it works very well with what we've got to work with. As you may recall, we could not modify Woodpecker here, the Wooden Twister, or the Ghost Train, so those are as is, but it helped us build around the whole thing. So let's take a tour of the park. As you come into our space here, you've got this nice little plaza with the dolphin statue. Seemed like it was appropriate with the seaside nature of everything. Got our carousel down here, which we're relocated from over here where the scrambler is now, and our slide with the S&S tower here as well, wrapped around by that monorail, which we'll see a little bit later. Have our couple of beach towels and umbrellas here. Again, use your imagination on those umbrellas. I think it's close enough, or as close as we're going to get anyway. Over here is our first coaster. This didn't get a name in the scenario, but our side friction here, where we have a low, medium, low. Not great stats, but also not really a problem because there's quite a long queue here for it, which is good. Part of that's probably because it's low capacity. But it's a pretty simple layout, just a stacked couple of figure eights. Very traditional, but that works for us here. And actually it's got some pretty speedy elements there towards the end, so I'm happy with the overall look. Got our Ferris wheel here at the end of the pier with all these various hats and souvenir stalls just to kind of fill that out, make it look appropriately pier-like. Then up on our hill around the wooden coaster here, we've got our Flying Dutchman little haunted swinging ship ride here, as well as the haunted house up top on the hillside. So as you come in here, walking around, you'll get that nice picture of the haunted house here, and the wooden coaster drop in the background fits that Haunted Harbor name very nicely, I think. We stacked in the Crooked House on top of the Ghost Train, and I think that was a good spot for it. And then on the other side up here, we have our car ride here. This is Highway to Hell. I've got a couple of little themed elements here, a little graveyard there, mausoleum, wraps around, sees Mr. Skeleton Guy, dives into this tunnel, and then pops out here into the daylight and back into the finish. Also our log flume above, but we'll get to that in a little bit. So as we continue along, we get over to the other side of our beach cove here. Got our Demolition Derby. These are the bumper cars. And then over here, we've got our Virginia Reel, which was renamed Twirling Tubs. Got the Wonderland theme on the whole thing. Pretty simple layout. Nothing super fancy on it, but it works very nicely. Has a good long queue. Stat-wise, we are highs down the board. Not too bad, I don't think. It feels appropriate as well, just based on the speed that it hits some of those corners. It looks a little whippy, perhaps. Up here, we've got our golf course. This is Triassic Golf, which, big fan of this one. I think it turned out really nicely with the various dino elements, the jungle bushes, this little water spout, and all the other different elements here. We got, what did we get? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 inside, and 10 holes to the whole thing. So even more than a 9-hole course, not too bad. And the whole thing. One of these days I want to build an 18-hole course. I think that could be fun. So wrapping around to the back here, we have our top spin, and if you spin around, we can see that's lined up very nicely along our overall midway right here. And then here on this other side, we have the Mild Waltz, which I thought that name was pretty clever. That was another redemption on Twitch. Pretty beefy-sized mouse here, but we separated it out from the larger hill of woodpecker here just so it didn't look too imposing, but I think it works out fairly nicely. Got our queue that wraps into the inside of the ride, and it's a pretty long layout too. Stat wise, we are high medium, so that's not too bad, I think, especially for one of these types of rides. Not super high capacity, but none of these rides so far have been, so that's alright. We can deal with that. Our log flume here was squeezed the heck in. This ended up getting the name Valhalla. Have our pond underneath of this whole thing, which was really forced in there. It doesn't feel totally squeezed too hard, I don't think. It seems like it sits very nicely overall. Nice big lift. Wind our way over top of the car right up here. Probably splash some folks down there maybe. And then have a nice size drop here at the end. Actually, this builds up a little bit of speed. It gives us a high excitement, which is pretty cool. So that's always good. Nice little run out here, and we're back to normal speed before we hit the corner, which is always something to think about. Spinning around our last two rides here, the monorail cycles that have a nice windy layout here, goes all the way around the park, including around our tower here, through the wooden coaster, then up and over. I don't know how many times we modified these, but in the end it worked out. I think it did pretty nicely there. And finally, our big wooden coaster here. This is Albatross, high, very high, and medium. The very high here is going to come from the fact that we've got all of these unbanked corners, which is not totally surprising. We could have maybe gone a little bit slower on some of these, but on the most part, I think it worked fairly nicely. This is probably the only one that we need to watch, because the other ones you can all kind of get the idea from it. But this turn's not too bad right here. A little bit speedy, but not bad for that size of corner. What the main feature of this ride was is this giant drop right here underneath of our pre-lift section. Nice interaction there. So here is a bit of fast curve there. Couple of little airtime hills that probably didn't help our intensity either, some of those, and then finally up and into the brakes. Fair bit of speed left over, which is a little bit of a shame, but there really was nowhere else to go with it, so I think it was a fairly decent ride as it is, and it's already like 2,400 feet, which isn't too awful for an older style wooden coaster perhaps. So there's our park. Like I said earlier, we didn't buy all of the land. If we were to do that, we would actually have another probably third of the park that we could expand to if we really wanted to. But in the end, we decided not to go that direction, and I'm pretty happy with how this one turned out. So this was one that I had been looking forward to for quite a while, so I am very satisfied with the result. I would really love to hear what you think about it. So let me know what your favorite coaster was, or what else you think we could have added to the whole thing. Next up is Fun Fortress, which is going to be a long one. That stream ended up being a two-parter, so more to come on that and more scenarios after that. If you'd like to catch us live, I've already said, but you can join us on twitch.tv/amusementacademy. There are links below to that, to our Discord, and to other things in case you want a t-shirt or whatever else. So, as always, thank you very much for watching. Let's take a look at some before and after, and then we'll catch you in the next one. Bye now.